For more on Canada's vote at the UN and what we've been hearing from the Prime Minister and the Liberal government on the call for a ceasefire, I want to bring in Dr. Ophir Falk. He's a foreign policy advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's joining us live from Tel Aviv. Sir, appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Andrew.
And so we heard Israel's ambassador to Canada say that your country is deeply disappointed in Canada's vote at the UN yesterday. Is that an accurate assessment of how the vote is being received by the Israeli government?
Well, I'm glad to hear now that the Prime Minister backpedaled on that resolution and has used strong language to denounce Hamas terrorism. I think that's a favorable thing. We're used to the double standards set by the UN, but we're not used to having double standards from our friends. It was disappointing, and I'm glad that the Prime Minister Trudeau backpedaled on that language. That's a good sign.
Okay, so I want to understand what you mean by that. But first, I just want to play that clip again, and then we'll talk more about this. This is what Justin Trudeau had to say just moments before a question period. Let's listen, and we'll get you to react.
In the face of an unfolding humanitarian catastrophe, we continue to call for a return to humanitarian pauses. We're going to keep participating in urgent international efforts towards a sustainable ceasefire, but it cannot be one-sided. We need to see Hamas lay down its arms. We need to see it release all hostages. We need to see it stop using civilians as human shields. And there cannot be any future role for Hamas in the governance of Gaza.
Okay, so that's what he had to say going into question period today. So your reaction to those words.
Right, so the Prime Minister Trudeau here says he's in favor of a pause. There was a pause for humanitarian purposes that the Hamas breached. He talked about the unconditional and the immediate release of hostages. That's a clear moral. That's a clear moral clarity. Unfortunately, that language is not existent in the UN resolution and is disappointing and unfortunate that Canada voted in favor of that double standard bias resolution. And I'm glad that now the Prime Minister took the opportunity to backpedal on that. Now, it's important to understand there was a ceasefire on October 6th. There was a ceasefire. And the Hamas breached that ceasefire, attacked Israel, murdered over 1,000 men, women, and children, repeatedly raped women, beheaded children, burnt babies alive. And that was a wage of war on Israel and on civilization. Israel is now destroying Hamas. We are going to destroy Hamas. And we are going to free our hostages, including a Canadian hostage, by the way. Any civilized country will back Israel because this is a war for civilization against Hamas savages. Israel will prevail. We will win. If we, God forbid, do not win, we are on the front line right now. But if we do not win, Hamas, well, the next stop is in Europe and the US and Canada, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton. That's the next stop. So right now, Israel's on the front line. And I can guarantee you one thing. If Canada ever is attacked, we'll be by your side. Israel will be by your side. And I appreciate the strong support we have received from the Canadian people. Daily strong support from the Canadian people. We highly appreciate that. The support we're receiving from our allies, from the United States, from the United Kingdom, from the people of Canada. We highly appreciate that.
What about, though, that, we also heard from the Foreign Affairs Minister yesterday, who reiterated what the Prime Minister has been saying, but also saying what's unfolding before our eyes will only enhance the cycle of violence. This will not lead to the durable defeat of Hamas. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I can't comment on that statement. What I can tell you is that Prime Minister Netanyahu's war cabinet made a very clear directive to the IDF: destroy Hamas and free the hostages. That is exactly what the IDF is doing. Not only for Israel's good, first and foremost for Israel, but for civilization. Again, This is a war between the civilized world and Hamas savages that behead children, burn babies alive. No country that is candidly and genuinely concerned about civilian lives can support Hamas. Every country that is genuinely concerned about civilian lives should be demanding the immediate and unconditional release of the hostages 24/7, all day, every day. Make that demand.
What happens when you have Joe Biden, the U.S. president, also saying, though, that the indiscriminate bombing needs to stop because Israel is losing support? The concern over the 2.3 million people in Gaza who have no safe place to go.
Well, President Biden has been strongly supporting Israel from day one. He came to Israel, stepped in. He was in Israel, by the way, in the war, strongly supporting Israel. We're on the same page on the need to destroy Hamas, demilitarize Gaza. That's obviously, there's no light between us on that. Every civilian casualty is a tragedy. Israel, from its existence, seeks to minimize civilian casualties. That is Israel's counterterrorism strategy, not only because it's the right thing to do, not only because we're the only Jewish state in the world and it's the right thing to do to minimize civilian casualties, but it's also the effective thing to do. Hamas, on the other hand, seeks to maximize civilian casualties, Israelis and Palestinians. They target our civilians, they indiscriminately rocket our city centers, butcher our people, and hide behind Palestinians, behind and below Palestinians. Why do they seek to do that? Why do they seek to maximize civilian casualties? Not only because they are a sick, genocidal terrorist organization, but because they think it is an effective propaganda tool. The civilized world cannot let that be an effective propaganda tool. And I'm glad that the Canadian people support Israel in our war against these savages.
Sir, I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you. Ophir Falk is
Thank you, Andrew.
Foreign policy advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We reached him in Tel Aviv.